My mother disowned me when I was pregnant at 21. Now she is begging to be a grandma after learning that my daughter's father is a billionaire. I told my mother I was pregnant at 21. She gave me 2 hours to pack and leave. Said I'd chosen motherhood and could handle the consequences alone. Changed locks while sitting on the front step with 2 garbage bags of clothes and nowhere to go. My daughter's father was a college freshman orientation one-night stand. Matthew was visiting from Switzerland, but I didn't know his last name. Never saw him again after that night. He didn't know his number or school. I quit school, moved into a shelter, and left Ella in a county hospital while my mother told everyone I went to Vegas to strip. Absolute hell lasted 6 years. Customers grabbed my ass for $3 tips while waiting tables at a diner. Black mold and roaches in a studio. Ella slept in a dresser drawer because I couldn't afford a crib. Food stamps, WIC appointments, 5-mile walk to work because the bus didn't leave early. My mother's 4-bedroom house was 30 minutes away. Without calling or visiting, she told family I was dead. My sister Olivia secretly met me at parks and brought Ella consignment clothes, but she was too scared to do more. Mom threatened to cut her off if she helped me. I succeeded, though. I got my GED online while Liam slept. 3 years old. She started community college. Got better waitressing jobs, saved money, and moved to a safer apartment. Ella was smart, funny, read at 4, and did basic math before kindergarten. Everything I did was for her. I saw a man enter my restaurant last month. An expensive suit with a Swiss accent stared at me. Finally, asked if I attended State University 6 years ago. My heart stopped. Matthew became Alexander Blackwood. His family ran luxury hotels in Europe. After his cousin showed him my university orientation archive photo, he searched for me for 3 years. He hired investigators, searched social media, and spent thousands to find a girl he'd spent one night with because he couldn't forget me. Telling him about Ella, showing her photo, he cried in the restaurant. His father pushed him to marry someone else. Alexander declined, thinking about the American girl who drunkenly quoted Shakespeare and laughed at his bad jokes. His desire was to meet Ella immediately. In a week, he set up a trust fund for her, bought us a house, and demanded $12,000 a month for 6 years of child support. After flying in from Switzerland, his family embraced Ella and showered her with gifts and affection. My mother returned then. She came to my new house with flowers and tears, admitting her mistake. She missed us a lot. Family should pardon. My neighbors told her about the Mercedes in my driveway, Swiss license plates, and high-end store delivery trucks. Her research revealed Alexander's identity and family value. Since Ella had a trust fund and Swiss finishing school potential, she wanted to be involved. I let her in and talk. She talked about second chances, my youth, and her desire for the best. After seeing Ella's photo with Alejandro's family at their Swiss estate, she was beaming. We should plan her 6th birthday together, said. Maybe in Switzerland. I've always wanted to see Geneva. Alexander entered from the kitchen. He heard everything. My mother looked radiant, extended her hand, and gushed about her granddaughter. Alexander inspected her hand for sewage. He whispered, "You're the woman who threw out your pregnant daughter?" My mother mumbled tough love and responsibility. Alejandro showed her his phone. Her face blanched. The shelter where your daughter spent her first month homeless provided this police report. She was abandoned as a youth. Her social services file shows she applied for emergency housing at 8 months pregnant. This hospital record shows she gave birth alone as indigent. Want me to continue? Alejandro interrupted my mother's explanation. He swiped to another screen and faced her. He spoke quietly but sharply. The shelter intake form displayed my name at the top and a red checkbox for abandoned minor. My mother started speaking, but Alejandro interrupted her to ask if she wanted him to finish his investigator's 6-year documentation. I froze by the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame, watching her make excuses. She said she didn't understand how bad things were, thought I'd figure it out, and was angry and scared. Alejandro scrolled through more screens without looking away, presenting hospital and social services records like evidence in court. Tears mixed with my mother's foundation, which she'd carefully applied before coming here. She spun around and trembled, saying she'd been so scared, made a terrible mistake, and thought about me every day. I stepped back before she could touch me and spoke calmly when I told her to leave. Alejandro walked beside me silently, supporting me as I opened the front door. My mother stood in the middle of my new living room, looking shocked. She requested that we talk so she could explain. I held the door open with my heart racing so loudly I thought everyone could hear it, but my hand didn't shake the knob. She collected her purse and flowers and walked past me with her head down and more tears. Before closing the door, I watched her get into her car and drive away, then leaned against it for a while as my legs weakened. Alejandro and I sat at the kitchen table after I checked that Ella was still sleeping upstairs, her nightlight glowing softly through her door crack. He apologized for ambushing me with the documents, saying he'd hired investigators to find me and gathered everything. He kept my full survival story in the files in case I needed proof. I held a cold mug of tea as we discussed what to do. I expected him to push for immediate family visits and plans with Ella, but he surprised me by suggesting legal paternity confirmation first. He said Ella and I deserved official and protected security after managing a loan for so long. 3 days later, we met Rachel Green in her downtown office with thick carpet and framed law degrees. She was younger than expected, maybe mid-30s, and wore a practical suit and a serious face. Rachel explained that Alexander Blackwood hired her to represent my interests, not his, and that she worked for me alone despite receiving his fees. She guided us through a court-admissible DNA test that would stand up in court. Having a lawyer who answered only to me was strange but safer than expected. Rachel took notes on a yellow legal pad as she asked detailed questions about what I wanted protected and what worried me most. Before test results arrived, she explained financial boundaries with a folder of documents. Alexander immediately put back child support into an escrow account that would release after official paternity confirmation. He couldn't take the house he bought back whatever happened between us because it was in my name with legal protections. It was overwhelming to read page after page of terms and clauses, but Rachel explained each section in plain language. She listed every precaution she'd taken to protect Ella and me in case something went wrong. My hand cramped as I signed where she instructed, but I was grateful for every word that prevented uncertainty. Olivia texted me that Mom was calling every relative after we finished. She told them I kept Liam a secret out of spite and was cruel for not letting her be a grandmother. The old fear of family isolation hit hard. Disconnection and loneliness had defined the last 6 years. I reminded myself that most of those relatives thought I was a Vegas stripper anyway. They never contacted me when I needed help. Ella looked up at me curiously as we sat on her bed with her stuffed rabbit under one arm that evening. I simply stated that a European friend I'd known before she was born wanted to meet her. I told her we'd take our time to find out if he was nice. I didn't call him father because nothing was confirmed and I wouldn't break my promises. Ella nodded seriously and asked if the friend liked cartoons too. I didn't know, but she could ask him questions and decide how she felt. At the end of the first week, we met at a sunny Saturday morning public park with newer equipment and wood chips instead of concrete. Alexander brought a cheap soccer ball and asked Ella about her favorite color and playgrounds. Standing half behind my leg, she was shy at first but curious enough to say she liked purple and swings. I watched them kick the ball on the grass from close. Alejandro, moving slowly and speaking softly. Ella stopped the ball with her foot and asked why he spoke funny, tilting her head like a puzzle. Alejandro laughed warmly and said he was from Switzerland, where people speak differently. He told her McDonald's is there, but the menu is in French and German. I saw him be honest and age-appropriate. Instead of promising trips or gifts, answer her questions like she was a real person whose thoughts mattered. I watched from a bench as they kicked the ball. Near enough to intervene, far enough to interact. Ella's guard relaxed as they played, but she still looked at me every few minutes to make sure I was there. My mother left a voicemail on day 8 that I listened to twice before deleting. She said she forgives me for keeping Ella from her for years. She wanted to move forward as a family for Liam and was ready when I was. I was angry and tired after listening. Dealing with an incomprehensible person exhausts you to the core. I didn't call back because I needed time to think and was done rushing into hurtful things. While I spread peanut butter on Ella's lunch, the phone sat silent on my kitchen counter. I realized that not responding was better than explaining myself again. I drove straight to work for the early shift, after dropping Ella off at kindergarten the next morning. I took my noon break and walked 3 blocks to the public library where I studied for my GED when Ella was a baby. I used an empty computer terminal in the back corner to research grandparents' rights in our state. The laws were strict, requiring proof of a relationship or that stopping contact would harm the child. My mother had neither, but the websites warned that determined grandparents could file petitions and drag families through thousands of dollars in court battles. I wrote statutes, case names, and filing requirements in a notebook. Gathering information made the fear seem smaller, more manageable, like something I could prepare for. I took phone photos of the relevant pages and emailed Rachel with a brief message asking if we should be worried. I put on my apron and took dinner orders at the restaurant. Still half thinking legal terms. Rachel's name appeared on my phone during my break the next afternoon. She wanted to schedule a consultation to protect Ella and me from legal harassment, saying we needed a paper trail and clear boundaries before my mother could gain legal ground. To accommodate the appointment on Tuesday at 10 a.m., I swapped shifts with another server. 2 regular customers sat in my section on Friday night, whispering loud enough for me to hear about the Mercedes with Swiss plates parked outside and whether I was dating a prince. Though my face burned, I kept my pen steady on the order pad and wrote their food choices clearly. A few minutes later, My manager saw me frozen by the kitchen door and quietly asked if I was okay, offering to move me to different tables if people were bothering me. I thanked him but said I could handle it, though my hands shook as I carried plates back to the dining room. Olivia texted on Saturday afternoon asking if we could meet for coffee somewhere out of the way. I suggested a place across town near the highway where no one from our neighborhood would recognize us. She was already in a corner booth when I arrived. She had her college textbook on the table, but her eyes looked sad. We ordered coffee, and she said she wanted to help me but was afraid Mom would cut her off financially because she was only halfway through her degree and couldn't lose her tuition. I squeezed her hand across the table and told her I understood, and that she'd helped us more than anyone by sneaking supplies during those terrible years. We cried quietly and wiped them away so other customers wouldn't notice. Monday morning's DNA test at a downtown medical office with official documentation and chain of custody procedures felt more serious than expected. A technician in blue scrubs explained each step on labeled forms and swabbed Ella's cheek and Alexander's with long cotton sticks. Ella laughed and asked if they were checking for cavities like the dentist, and Alexander smiled and said something similar. We agreed silently not to tell her what the test was for until we had results, keeping our explanations simple, honest, and not scary. Ella ran to the car, talking about how the stick tickled, while Alejandro and I looked relieved. Week 3 brought the lawyer consultation where Rachel spread options across her conference table like cards in a complicated game. We could establish a formal custody arrangement through the courts, create privacy protocols to keep this situation out of gossip circles, and send a cease and desist letter to my mother if she kept harassing us. The clarity helped, even though the paperwork looked endless, stack after stack of forms that needed signatures and notarization. Alejandro and I spent 2 hours that afternoon drafting a co-parenting outline that started with supervised visits and built gradually based on Ella's comfort level. Rachel suggested specific schedules with backup plans for holidays and sick days, making it feel real and manageable instead of scary and overwhelming. We both signed the draft to show good faith while we waited for test results, our signatures looking official at the bottom of the page. On Thursday, my phone rang during my dinner shift, and I saw Ella's school number on the screen. The administrator's voice was calm but firm, explaining that my mother had shown up at the office claiming to be the grandmother and asking about pickup procedures. I told my manager I had an emergency and left work immediately, my hands shaking with protective anger as I drove the 6 blocks to the school. The administrator assured me they hadn't released any information and asked if I wanted to file a formal restriction to prevent future incidents. I said yes without hesitation, filling out the paperwork right there in the office while Ella played on the playground, unaware of what had happened. Through Rachel, I sent my mother a written letter the next day, establishing a no-contact boundary and explaining that any further attempts to access Ella or spread family rumors would result in legal action. Signing it made me feel sick with guilt, but also strangely powerful, like I was choosing safety over keeping the peace for the first time in my life. That night, after Ella fell asleep, I started a private journal documenting every interaction, voicemail, and incident involving my mother. Rachel had said it could matter in court someday, but it also helped me process everything, turning the chaos into organized facts on paper. Writing down what actually happened made it harder for me to doubt myself later, creating a record that couldn't be argued with or rewritten. The next afternoon, Alejandro showed up at my apartment with a catalog from some European furniture company, pages marked with sticky notes showing elaborate dollhouses that cost $4,000. He spread the catalog on my kitchen table and pointed to a Victorian-style mansion with working lights and hand-carved details, saying, "Ella deserved beautiful things after the years we'd struggled." I stared at the price tag and felt my stomach twist because that was more than 2 months of my old rent, more than I'd spent on furniture for our entire apartment. I told him it was too much too fast, that Ella was 5 and would be just as happy with a $50 plastic one from the toy store. He looked confused and a little hurt, like he genuinely didn't understand why throwing money at everything wasn't the solution. We sat there for 20 minutes talking through it until I explained that experiences mattered more than expensive stuff. That taking her to the children's museum or the zoo would create better memories than a dollhouse she'd outgrow. Alejandro listened and actually adjusted his thinking instead of pushing back, suggesting we plan a weekend trip to the science center with the interactive exhibits Ella loved. That willingness to hear me and change course mattered more than any gift he could buy. 3 days later, the DNA results arrived by courier in an official envelope with lab seals and legal stamps. Alejandro came over that evening and we sat on my couch reading through pages of genetic markers and probability percentages that all confirmed what we already knew. We called Ella in from her room where she'd been coloring and sat her between us on the couch, keeping our voices calm and simple. Alexander told her he was her daddy, and that he'd been looking for us for a very long time, that he didn't know about her before, but now he did and he wanted to be part of her life. Ella processed this quietly, her face serious in that way kids get when they're trying to understand something big. Then she asked if this meant she had grandparents in Switzerland like her friend Maya had grandparents in California. We said yes, that she had a whole family there who wanted to meet her when she was ready, but only when she felt comfortable. She nodded and went back to her coloring like she needed time to think about it alone. The next morning, I met with Rachel at her office and she recommended a child therapist named Phyllis Moore who worked specifically with kids going through major family changes. We scheduled an intake appointment for the following week, giving Ella a safe space to process everything without us hovering. Rachel explained that professional support wasn't admitting failure. It was protecting Ella from being overwhelmed by adult situations. I was learning that asking for help didn't mean I was weak. It meant I was smart enough to know when we needed guidance. That same afternoon, my phone rang during my shift at the restaurant, and I saw a local area code I didn't recognize. The voicemail asked me to call back regarding a comment on the secret air story that was apparently spreading online. My hands started shaking as I listened to the reporter explain she'd heard about Alexander Blackwood's daughter and wanted to verify facts before publishing. I immediately called Rachel Green from the restaurant bathroom, my voice tight with panic. She told me to activate the privacy plan we'd discussed, which meant zero engagement with any media and letting the story die from lack of information. We agreed to say nothing publicly and treat silence as our strongest defense. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox with my mother's handwriting on the front. Inside was a 5-page letter that mixed apology language with conditions and demands, saying she was sorry for her mistakes, but also listing all the places she wanted to take Ella, and suggesting we plan a family trip to Switzerland together. She wrote about how much she'd missed us and how family should forgive. But every paragraph came with strings attached and expectations that I'd forget 6 years of abandonment. I read it twice and recognized the manipulation pattern clearly now, seeing how she was trying to force her way back in by acting like everything was already forgiven and we were already a happy family again. She wanted access to Ella and Alexander Blackwood's world without actually earning back trust or proving she'd changed. The letter went into my documentation folder with all the other evidence. The following Tuesday, I met with Phyllis Moore at her office while Alexander waited in the lobby. She asked detailed questions about Ella's routine, her personality, how she'd handled changes in the past, what worried me most about this transition. Then, Alexander came in and we both explained the situation from our different perspectives, while Phyllis took notes. After an hour, she brought Ella in for a session using toys and art supplies, keeping everything gentle and age-appropriate. Ella drew pictures and played with dollhouse figures, while Phyllis asked casual questions about her family and feelings. At the end, Phyllis told us to keep Ella's schedule very predictable and introduce changes gradually, letting Ella control the pace of relationship building. She gave us specific scripts for talking about hard topics and ways to check in with Ella without making her feel interrogated. That night, Olivia texted asking if I'd consider supervised limited contact with our mother to reduce the chance she'd file for grandparents' rights out of spite. I stared at my phone, torn between protecting Olivia and knowing my mother hadn't earned Ella's access. I wanted to ease my sister's burden after years of secretly helping us. However, another part knew that manipulating to avoid conflict was how my mother had ruled everyone for decades. I told Olivia I needed to think and consult my lawyer. The next morning, Rachel explained our state's grandparents' petition laws, including that my mother had almost no standing to demand visitation without a relationship. She suggested mediation first as a good faith gesture that would create legal documentation if my mother was unreasonable. We could show a judge we tried to resolve things, and my mother was the opposite.